Welcome to New York, and here as we wrap up today's events at the first ever Qualcomm New York City ePrix. Now, the story coming into this weekend that championship leader Sébastien Buemi couldn't be here because of a clash of commitments, and that man there, Pierre Gasly, was going to take his valuable seat in the Edam's Renault car. How did he get on? Well, he had a difficult qualifying, started back in 19th after various issues, but in the race managed to move forward a long way. P7 was where he ended up, was actually pretty respectable, scored a decent chunk of points. The Renault Edam's team actually had a reasonably difficult weekend. Both guys finished 7th and 8th, so Gasly in 7th, Prost in P8, but both cars had damage, and you can see there, that is Nico Prost's nose cone from his first car, heavily damaged. There was lots and lots of contact, and you're going to see as we walk along this pit lane, he is not the only one. Lots of teams suffer today with contacts, a very tight circuit, heading in particularly from the start down to turn 1 and the first few corners, lots of people bumping into each other. The nice thing, I guess, for Renault, they didn't lose too many points to the app team over here in the championship, and I guess that is their big positive for today. They get another chance tomorrow. Pierre Gasly has done one day in a Formula E car. He'll get the chance to double his experience by tomorrow evening. Now, here we go. Now, the app team. Now, Daniel Abt, this was a heartbreaking day for him. He qualified in P2, a fantastic afternoon's qualifying, and in the race got a brilliant start and was leading that race and did such a good job until he had a BMS error, a battery error, and the battery essentially shut down. He lost all of his regen capability, and right at the end of that race, when it was looking like he was going to score a huge chunk of points for the team, he slipped all the way back down to P14. Actually didn't even make the checkered flag on that last lap. Up until that point, he was doing really well. He'd saved energy. He had 3 or 4% more energy than the guys in front of him before a safety car came out with just 4 laps to go, and essentially that closed up and nullified the advantage that he might have had. So a difficult afternoon. De Grassi, though, his qualifying was affected by a yellow flag that came out on his hot lap. He wasn't on the best qualifying lap anyway, I have to say, but the yellow flags really spoilt any chance he might have had. So he ended up starting the race back in P10, but actually ended up finishing P4, which, given that Sébastien Buemi's not here, you might say this was his opportunity to win, to capitalise, to gain that 25 points over his main rival. But P4 actually, it's not too bad. The championship lead, the championship gap right at the top of that table is now down to 20 points. And don't forget, this is a double header, so you'll get another shot, again without Buemi being here, to really close that gap, potentially even walk away as championship leader. So damage limitation, I guess, as you could say, down at Abt. Now, Faraday Future Dragon Racing. This was, I guess, a tale of two halves. Loic Duval had a great day, ended up P5. It's one of the best results the team has had. The guy said they left a little bit of energy on the table in the first car, so potentially could have gone a little bit harder in that first stint, but nevertheless a great result. On the other side, Jerome D'Ambrosio, they put in a new energy map into the car just before the start of the race. They tried to be, I guess it's fair to say, they tried to be a little bit too clever with their energy maps, trying to do something a little bit different, looking for the tiny advantages, as the top teams will always try and do. And somehow, in putting in that new map into the system, there was a finger trouble error. There was a number put in wrong, or a plus or a minus put in wrong, something like that. And anyway, it ended up really affecting his race. He had a very difficult afternoon off the back of that. He also had contact, I think, with Piquet or Turvey, damaged his rear wing and got black and orange flagged, had to come back in. And at that point, he was going for the fastest lap and didn't quite manage to make it happen. So a really difficult afternoon. But the nice thing with those guys is they have got pace in the car. They've taken a step forward, and that's a positive. Now we're outside the Venturi team, and as you can see from all this bodywork down here, look how this is really quite a typical scene from most of these teams along pit lane. More damage where cars have run into each other. Maro Engel did in fact get the fastest lap of the race, and therefore gets his point for that Visa fastest lap. Tom Dillman, which is the car you're looking at now, had a drive shaft error. A few people had that up and down pit lane, drive shaft errors or failures where the drive shaft popped out of the upright. And I think a lot of people are thinking at this stage it's partly due to the aggressive curbs around this track and drivers hitting them a bit too hard, essentially just ripping the drive shaft out of the upright. Before that, Tom Dillman was up to P8, so actually was looking pretty good. Engel, as I say, had that fastest lap. He had contact early on, and it was a wheel-to-wheel contact, but it damaged, in fact, Nick, if you come over here, you can see it damaged the valve, the tyre valve on the tyre. If you look at that tyre there that's no longer attached to the rim, that's what happened to his first car. And, you know, the tyre deflated because they knocked the valve off and essentially had to come in for a change. Ruined his race, and in the end he had a battery shutdown in qualifying that he started back in P20 and he only really ended up in P17. So that point for fastest lap is actually probably the best they could have hoped for today. Now, next EV, this is a really tough one. Again, more damage. There's another nose cone here that's damaged, 2 nose cones damaged. They're all over the place. The spares man at Formula E is going to be a busy man this evening. But this is the team that had a real problem today. They had some powertrain issues, and that really is as much as they will tell me at the moment. Powertrain issues in inverted commas. The point here is that really cost them the afternoon because they were having to back off. They couldn't run at full speed because of this issue. Nelson Piquet Jr. was hit at some point by Jerome D'Ambrosio. Again, it cost him time. And so nothing really went right for them today. They did score points with Turvey in P6, so there's a positive to be taken from that. But actually they've got a lot of work to do tonight in understanding what the issue was and trying to fix that ahead of tomorrow's race. This is a garage that is full of happiness and joy this evening because they had their best ever Formula E weekend. P2 for Jean-Eric Vergne and P3 for Sarrazin, so a double podium. And really great reward for a team that have been moving forward gradually but have had some kind of operational issues. They've had a bit of bad luck. Today it all came good. Stefan Sarrazin, I've got to say, is my driver of the day. He started back in P11, and so to get up to P3 I think is an absolutely fantastic drive. By the pit stops, by the mid-race car changes, he was already up to P4, so he had a great start. He was aggressive with his overtakes and did a very, very good job, I think. Jean-Eric Vergne actually thinks he could have won this race. If it hadn't been for that safety car right at the end, he could have potentially won the race. He thought that Sam Bird was struggling with his energy towards the end and may have had to back off, and he saw an opportunity, and if it hadn't been for that safety car, he thinks he could have really capitalised and gone for it and potentially got his first win here in Formula E. Now, this is a pit lane. If you ever look up and down pit lane, this is a slightly unique pit lane in that the garages are opposite each other. So you have this issue when the cars come out from their pit stop, from their driver change, they're all coming out of the garage and essentially meeting in the middle. So potential danger. Today we got away with it and they all kind of managed it quite easily, but there's potential for disaster here. The other point to note, actually, just from Techeetah's garage, this is the pit lane entry that you see coming round here, right up to Techeetah's garage. When they release that car from the pit stop, they have to be very careful not to release it into the path of another car that might be coming into pit lane because it's deemed as an unsafe release and can cost them dearly with a heavy penalty. These guys have got a tough job because they don't get a lot of notice to see when a car is going to come around that corner. Now this is a garage that's full of damage. Again, more damaged nose cones. We had damaged suspension I saw earlier behind the barriers over here. There's another damaged wing over this side. There's broken bits, as I say, all over the place. And it was a frustrating afternoon for these guys because Mitch Evans had a crash right on lap 1 which cost him the race. It came in, it broke his suspension. He came in and decided to go for the fastest lap, which ultimately they didn't have the pace to achieve. So they think they could have probably achieved a faster lap than they did, and they're now looking into that tonight to work out what the reasons were, because that valuable point for fastest lap could actually mean a lot to them. On the other side of the garage, Adam Carroll did actually get a point for P10, and he had a brake issue. On this car here that you're looking at just to the left of you now, where the mechanics are just changing some of the suspension or the steering arms there, on that corner of the car they had a brake overheating issue. And it was quite costly because Adam had to really back off before the temps got to a critical level and he was going to have to stop. And it was actually quite good communication, good work between Adam and his engineers. Adam is quite an experienced driver, and he managed to work out that he could change the brake bias, put more of the braking energy into the rear brakes to sort of alleviate the problem on the front, and that really managed to get those temperatures under control and allow him to fight for that P10. So a difficult one, but a P10 which gives him the point actually for Jaguar is not a bad result. Andretti are the home team here, and you've got to say they're going to walk away slightly disappointed. They had a slightly innocuous afternoon, I guess. Felix da Costa got involved in an incident early on with a Venturi car and came in with a flat tyre. Essentially, that was his race ruined at that point. He ended up P12, and Robin Friends managed to get himself from P16 up to P9. So he scored a couple of points, but this is not really the afternoon that the guys from Andretti, the big bosses, the sponsors of the team, would have really loved to have seen. However, this is also a team that has just announced BMW are going to be taking over as the title partner for this team. It's going to be a full manufacturer-based team from season 5. So there's a lot of positivity for the future here. BMW may be able to come in at a time when the Andretti team have been struggling, they haven't had brilliant results. Perhaps BMW can take them to the next level that we'd all really love to see them at. Now, Mahindra had a wonderful weekend in Berlin, didn't they? We saw them celebrating. They won that race with Felix Rosenqvist. I guess here it was probably the opposite end of the scale. Certainly not in terms of pace, because what we saw here today was that the pace they had in Berlin wasn't a fluke, it wasn't circuit specific, because they brought that forward, they carried it on to here in New York. But everything kind of went wrong. Heidfeld hit the wall at the exit of turn 9, damaged his car. His car, the rear suspension was crabbing going down the straights for about 3 laps before finally both rear drive shafts pulled out of the uprights and the car stopped. There's a lot of work going on at the back of that car because they've got to change the gearbox, they've got to change the drive shafts. They've got to change pretty much everything from the motors backwards to make sure we don't have a repeat of that problem tomorrow. I thought it was interesting and slightly strange actually that Nick Heidfeld himself parked his car when it finally stopped, got out of the car and left the circuit, and ended up having to come back onto the track to help the one marshal, to remove the car from the circuit. And that really, the guy said to me in the garage that was just Nick being conscientious. He didn't want the safety car to be going on and spoiling the race for too long, so he kind of tried to get the marshals going and get the thing off the track and get it under racing conditions again. Rosenqvist had a good race up until the point where he started P17. He got himself up to P5, which was fantastic. Great driving from Felix. He came under serious pressure, didn't he, from Lucas di Grassi towards the end of that race, and he spun. When he spun, he hit the wall, he damaged his rear wing, and unfortunately that was his race ruined. He came in and he was going to go for the fastest lap, which he probably would have got had it not been for that safety car that came out again towards the end. So driver errors, I guess, really is the story of Mahindra's day. But the pace is there, so lots of positivity to look forward to tomorrow, because they can correct those things. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with their setup, and they're looking for a much better afternoon tomorrow. Now, the final team on my list today, I'm really delighted to say, is Virgin Racing. DS Virgin Racing, a wonderful afternoon. Sam Bird takes the win, something that's been coming for a while now, and I'm so pleased for Sam. He had his girlfriend and his mum here, and of course Sir Richard Branson. This was a wonderful day for him. He really held on, he had the whole thing under control, got a fantastic start, and managed his energy all the way through. Look, down here is the trophy. Look at that, the New York trophy, the first ever man to win a motor race in New York City. That's something that no one can ever take away from him. But he really kept his head all day long. He had a car that was, had great pace, but he was coming under pressure. The team were telling him to just build a gap of about 1.5 seconds, which is what he did, and just manage it. There was no point in him disappearing off into the distance because you just use up energy. So he kept the distance, he handled the pressure very, very well and saw it out all the way to the finish. Earlier on, of course, Alex Lynn started his debut Formula E race on pole. A great afternoon's qualifying for him, but it really came unstuck a little bit when it came to energy management over the race. It's not the first time we've seen this. If you remember when Jean-Eric Verne turned up in Formula E for the first time, he also put it on pole, yet struggled in the race. It shows you just how hard Formula E is. This is a unique type of motor racing and not something that most drivers have ever had experience of in the past. In the end, Alex Lynn started to drop back as he was having to heavily manage that energy, and actually Alex Tighe called the driver switch. He made a team order that it was a very sensible call, I think, absolutely the right thing to do. He had Sam Bird sat behind Alex and being held up, He called it to switch the two of them. Alex Lynn did exactly what he was told, which Alex Ty told me is a very good thing, because if he hadn't, he may not have been racing tomorrow, and their reserve driver is Sir Richard Branson. And much as we'd love to see that from a comical aspect, I'm not sure it'd be the best thing for performance terms. So Alex, I think the weekend has to go down as a good one. This is his debut weekend. Lots of positivity, lots of good things that are being said about him. He's got a bright future, hopefully, in Formula E. But let's take our hats off today to Virgin Racing, who have taken the champagne and the trophy away from the first ever ePrix in New York City.